with world leaders, with executives, and by hosting early career leadership training through our Young Leaders Programming and Global Leadership Seminar and other programs that we do. If you're a current young leader of the World Affairs Council of Atlanta, would you please raise your hand? A wonderful representation. Thank you all for being here. Those who've been to many of our programs and those who are new. If it's your first World Affairs Council of Atlanta event, please raise your hand. We've got one. We've got some, okay. 1.5. 2018, that was a lifetime ago. It was a pandemic ago. Well, welcome to all of you, and I'll just give you a brief rundown of how the morning is going to go. Welcome remarks, of course. We're going to have a video from CARE CEO Michelle Nunn, who I'm just so grateful really spent some time to send a message to you all this morning. She, of course, this is United Nations General Assembly Week. She is not in town, and so we're so honored to have a video from her. And then I'll be introducing our panelists. And I'm going to do a thing that I normally commit to not doing, which is to really read a full bio for them, because you all are here to understand what it means to have a career, an international career, and we've invited these guests because they can represent them. There's also a digital program. You can use the QR code on your tables. If you'd like to read more, there's hyperlinks. There's more information in the digital program. So there's 3 things that I would love for you all to walk out of this room with this morning. My team and I have really thought through what is the point of today. And so please keep these in mind as we go through our program today. By the end of this seminar, we would like our attendees to have been exposed to actionable career development tools, to be connected to diverse and unique career opportunities, and to have gained meaningful connections with other young professionals and experts. So those are your tasks for today, in addition to all the other reasons that you may be here and what you want to get out of this. And so with that, I'm going to, first of all, I also want to thank Kadisha Francis. Kadisha, please raise your hand. Thank you, Kadisha, for really being the driving force behind today's event. And we also have our graduate students, Dan Iboga and Yasmin Kone and Rosie. And we also have some other volunteers, Kadisha's husband and sister here. Hello, Brian and Jana. Thank you for joining us. I walked in and suddenly my staff had doubled. So let's have a video from Michelle Nunn first. Michelle Nunn is president and CEO of CARE USA, a global humanitarian organization that works to save lives, defeat poverty, and achieve social justice. Since 2015, Nunn has spearheaded an ambitious strategy to expand impact and revenue, investing in innovative programs, partnerships, and social enterprises. Before CARE, Nunn built a career of civic and public service as a social entrepreneur, a nonprofit CEO, and a candidate for the U.S. Senate right here in Georgia. She co-founded Hands On Atlanta, expanded it into a national network, and led its merger with Points of Light to create the world's largest organization dedicated to volunteer service. We'll have some opening remarks now from Michelle Nunn.
Hi, I'm Michelle Nunn, President and CEO of CARE USA, and I want to thank the World Affairs Council of Atlanta for inviting me to speak to you today at the inaugural Global Leadership Seminar. And I just wish that I could be there in person, but I'm so glad to be able to have the chance to join you virtually. So maybe I'll start with just a little bit of the story and history of CARE, for those of you who don't know, and anybody that we might be able to pull into our future story going forward. CARE was founded as a cooperative, and it happened 78 years ago in the wake of World War II to support those who had survived the war, but who were hungry and in need of this life-saving food and supplies. And those supplies were delivered as the world's very first official care packages. So I bet that many of you all have, in some sense, received or sent a care package, and most people don't know that that actually originated with the organization CARE. And at that point, it stood for Cooperative Assistance and Remittances for Europe. And over the years, it's grown and become CARE. And that small group, it was a group of individuals, and they enlisted 22 organizations, and they just had the audacity, the courage, the vision to come together and help at a critical moment. And they found a way within actually planning for a few weeks to deliver 20,000 care packages from Philadelphia to Le Havre, France. And then over the next 2 decades, CARE and its partners figured out how to deliver over 100 million care packages, actually far beyond Europe. And it's just grown into a real, I would say, a global movement. And our mission is to save lives, and that means we're still doing that emergency response, but also to defeat poverty, long-term response, and development, and to achieve social justice. And we've found over the years that when we center our work on women and girls, we have a disproportionate impact. And we know that we can't defeat poverty without having equality. So today, as we stand here, CARE is one of the largest humanitarian organizations in the world. And last year, for instance, we served over 174 million people in 111 countries. And in the past 3 years, as we've seen these disaster after disaster, from COVID-19 to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, to the deadly earthquake in Turkey and Syria, as well as the growing hunger crisis, we've just seen the enormous global impact. And we've also tried to respond to this moment. So we've tried to meet this moment along with our peers and to bring about both the immediate needs to help meet those, but also to bring about the lasting change that can mean the difference between a life of great potential and one where somebody stands on the margins. And our goal for the next few years, by 2030, is to impact 200 million people, and to create, again, a more just and equitable world where we really see poverty shrinking and gender equality growing. And so maybe just to give you a few reflections from a leadership journey perspective, since I joined CARE in 2015, I have worked with amazing people around the world and incredible change agents. And I've also spent my career engaged with change agents who are trying to bring positive possibilities to life, both here in the United States and around the world. And so if I take some of those lessons that I've learned from so many people and so much in the advice that I've received, I thought maybe I would offer a couple of highlights to share with you all, maybe 5 highlights. And they're kind of truisms, things that you all already know, but maybe just to reinforce how important. The first is just being a really good listener. And really think about asking more questions than doing more talking. And just recognizing that everyone that you meet, everyone that you encounter has something to teach. So that's the first. The second is to take risks and to lean into hard choices, to trust your gut. I think it's always really hard. Every day we have something probably that we sort of shy away from doing because we're afraid of failure or afraid of rejection or we're intimidated. And so just try and push on those risk-taking. We all are trying to do that in new ways and learn that throughout our career again and again. And then the third is that I would try and think about what are your superpowers? I think a lot of us spend a lot of time trying to overcome the things that we're not that good at, maybe we don't love. And I would just say, why don't you first start by thinking about what are those things that you love, that you're intrinsically good at, and really think about how do you maximize those? How do you really lift those up for the world? The fourth is sort of associated with that, which is how do you get a realistic picture of what your weaknesses are, and how do you collaborate with others who maybe have strengths that you don't have, and thereby complement those perhaps things that you wish you could do better with people who are really already great at those things. And the fifth is that I think at this moment there is really nothing in the world in terms of the biggest challenges that can be solved by any one sector. So, government can't do it all in terms of climate change, or, nonprofits certainly can't be the only ones that are addressing poverty. It has to be the private sector, the philanthropic sector, and government. And so, think about how you can get experiences across those sectors. We need more people that have the capacity to understand, to work, to coordinate across those sectors. And then finally, I just want to offer a hope that you all have an extraordinarily meaningful seminar, that you emerge with deeper insights and also ideas for career opportunities. There's so many possibilities for living out your hopes for making a difference in the world, and certainly the INGO pathway is an exciting one. So again, thanks for including me today, and I just know that we're counting on the next generation of change makers to lead us into a world which CARE has described as our vision, a world of hope and inclusion and social justice, where poverty has been overcome and where all people live with dignity and with security. So thanks, everybody.
Well, thank you, Jonah. And so the first thing she said about first tool is to listen deeply. After this morning's panel, we're going to take a break, and then Improv Theater, Dad's Garage Theater Company is going to be coming in and doing some communication workshops with us. If you've never done any of these, they're definitely outside your comfort zone. We won't make you do improv in front of a bunch of strangers, but deep listening is absolutely a career tool that we're all going to walk out of here a little bit more aware of, among the other things that Dad's Garage is going to be doing with us today. But first, let's start with an extraordinary panel. We're so honored to have 4 experts who have had international careers. And we'll start with Ambassador Harry Thomas, and I'm just going to read your bio and then have you come up, Harry. Ambassador Harry K. Thomas is a senior Kissinger Fellow at Yale University's Jackson Institute, senior advisor for EEC Solutions, Orbis Operations in Dataminr. He formerly served as a strategic advisor at Special Operations Command, a personal business consultant, and an international affairs lecturer. He is an Export-Import Africa Advisory Board member. Over his 34 years of service to the Foreign Service, he represented the United States abroad as ambassador 3 times and served in senior positions in the State Department and the White House. He retired in March 2018 with the rank of career minister. He served as ambassador to Zimbabwe, the Philippines, and Bangladesh. Ambassador Thomas also served as the State Department's Executive Secretary and Special Assistant to Secretary Susan Rice, Director General of the Foreign Service, and Director of Human Resources, Director for South Asia, and the National Security Council, and Director of the Operations Center. Ambassador Thomas speaks Spanish, Hindi, Bengali, and conversational Tagalog. What is it? Tagalog. And you can tell us more about that. He is a graduate of the College of the Holy Cross and holds a master's from Columbia University. Ambassador Thomas holds honorary doctorates from the College of the Holy Cross, Loyola University of Maryland, and Angeles University Foundation of the Philippines, and was the commencement speaker at these institutions. Ambassador Harry Thomas, welcome to the stage. Kemsi Singh is the Senior Director and Lead for the Institutional Partnerships Team at World Food Program USA, a catalyst for fundraising, advocacy, and engagement in support of the largest humanitarian organization, and 2020 Nobel Prize recipient in the United Nations World Food Program. She also led as Director of the Foundation's Organizational and Institutional Relationships team at Habitat for Humanity International, part of Habitat's Global Partnerships Management. Prior to that, Kim was Director of Development at CARE USA, where she managed strategic partnerships and alliances to resource CARE's work and programming around the world. Kim has expertise in catalyzing and or stewarding key external relationships with various sized partners in global contexts, including Europe, Africa, as well as North America. She's also been engaged in various policy arenas, including the United Nations Framework Convention for Climate Change, global multilateral environmental agreements, as well as various national policies and processes, such as national poverty reduction strategy papers in various countries. Welcome to the stage, Kelsey Zink. Jason Dozier represents District 4 in the Atlanta City Council. And Jason, maybe you can help us understand who and what is in your district as part of our conversation. He's Senior Advisor at Hire Heroes USA, a national nonprofit dedicated to empowering U.S. military members, veterans, and military spouses to succeed in the civilian workforce. After graduating from Denison University with a degree in history and education, he joined the United States Army, where he served as a reconnaissance officer in both Iraq and Afghanistan, earning both the Army Commendation Medal and the Bronze Star. A native Atlantan, he returned to Georgia to help transitioning military veterans in a full-time capacity while concurrently earning a Master of Public Administration degree from the University of Georgia. Jason also has earned a Master of Science in Real Estate degree from Georgia State University, and as a result has been an active member of the Urban Land Institute, the International City County Management Association, and the Atlanta Regional Commission's Millennial Advisory Panel. He has also served on the board for 2 Atlanta transportation advocacy organizations, the Atlanta Bicycle Coalition, which works to transform Atlanta into a more livable, accessible city by making biking equitable, safe, and appealing, and Advance Atlanta, which is a citizen-driven grassroots advocacy coalition dedicated to building support for transit expansion in Metro Atlanta. Welcome to the stage, City Councilman Dozier. And Saul Hernandez is a career Foreign Service officer with over 19 years of experience in the U.S. Department of State. He is the diplomat in residence for the Southern region, recruiting diverse talent for career and student program opportunities with the U.S. Department of State. Saul was previously the director for the Outreach and Communications Unit and the Public Diplomacy Incubator Unit in the Office of Policy Planning and Resource for the Undersecretary for Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs. He led a team that engages with Congress to advocate for public diplomacy resources for the department, develops communication strategies for 4,000 public diplomacy practitioners worldwide, and manages digital outreach for the 700,000 members of the Young African Leaders Initiative Network and the Young Leaders of the Americas Initiative Network. Saul's other Department of State assignments include Lima, Peru, where he served as the press officer, Washington, D.C., where he served as the digital media advisor for the Bureau of Western Hemisphere Affairs, and as media relations officer for the Washington Foreign Press Center, Tbilisi, Georgia, where he served as the cultural affairs officer, and Prague, Czech Republic, and Bogota, Colombia, where he served as a consular officer. Saul earned a Bachelor of Science degree from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and before joining the Department of State, he worked as an information technology consultant and software developer here in the Atlanta area. Welcome to the stage, Saul Hernandez. So anyone who's come to my programs knows that I just sort of tell you, read the bio on your own because to save time, but I think it's important that we all remember the extraordinary contributions that this panel has made and how much hard work you all have put into your careers. It's not just about titles and geographic postings. It's creative thinking, it's strategic thinking, it's career development, it's leadership development, while personal work goes into building a career as well. And that's all what we're going to explore today in our panel. So I think that I've got 8 questions here that I'm going to lead the conversation. And of course, we also want to prioritize Q&A. So our conversation will be free-flowing, and then we'll be leaving plenty of time for you all to ask questions. And after that, during our break, I've asked the panelists who were able to stay to actually hang out at some of the tables so you can come up and actually ask them questions and engage with them as well. That's really important. And then after that, we'll be getting to the Dad's Garage portion of the morning. So I'm going to ask each of you, I'm going to start at the end with Saul and come this way, we'll go back and forth. Tell us about the moment when you realized, this is what I want to do with my life.
Thank you so much, Rick. So as you heard in my bio, I've been working in information technology here in Atlanta, and I love the people that I work with. I love the types of projects we were working on. But one of the challenges that I faced was, as my salary was going up, my level of satisfaction with the job was declining. I was finding that I was working long hours for a bottom line for a corporation, and at a certain point that had become what was motivating. So I went to a college reunion, and a friend of mine said, you know, my girlfriend is now his wife as a foreign service officer, and she is served in Moscow, she's served in Geneva, Switzerland, she's now in Washington, D.C. working on USPEC issues, and I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to meet her. I planned a trip up to Washington, D.C., spent a week speaking with her and with my friend, going to the Library of Congress, preparing for the Foreign Service Officer test. That was 2002. In May of 2004, I joined the Foreign Service as a Foreign Service Officer.
So I both love and hate that question because it is a realization that I didn't have until later in life. I used to joke that most of my life decisions up until I turned 30 were kind of happenstance. I was kind of winging a lot of the big decisions in my life. When I left for college, I went to school out of state just to try something different and know what that adventure will lead me towards. I know in my bio you have read that I was a history and education double major. I was wanting to be a teacher. Teaching is hard, y'all. So after my student teaching exercise was the same career for me. Came back home, worked in the warehouse for a year, and that was a big impetus behind joining Army. Was that it was a thing that a lot of people do when they don't know what they do with their lives, is they go into the military. And honestly, the realization I had was I was in Iraq and in Baghdad, and I had as a scout platoon leader would control 3 or 4 times a day. But I would get to know the people of Baghdad. I would get to visit these historical and cultural sites that had been around for centuries, if not millennia. And I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. Atlanta's only been around for about 170 years. And that was kind of where it clicked for me that I wanted to come back home and come back to my hometown and do what I could to ensure that Atlanta, Georgia stood the test of time. Same way that Baghdad and Kabul, some of the other places that I've been able to do so. It was a weird revelation, especially considering where I was, but I think that was the moment in my life. I was about 28 when I decided this is where I want to go for the rest of my life.
I think it's a marvelous question, and when I have to think about the answer, it always makes me, I always have to recall the 2 parts of my own timeline. So from the time I was about 11 years old, I absolutely knew I wanted to be in sustainable development. Absolutely knew I wanted to be part of that. That's the wanting part of it. The wanting part is not the commitment to the hard road. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the harder road part of it. The harder road part of it, I would say for me, was when I studied environmental microbiology. And there was a point in time in which I was collecting contaminated water from certain communities. And I was collecting this water and I was going into these communities every morning thinking about the life I have and the life I probably will have and the lives they will not have. And when you're looking at children that might not live past the age of 10, it's very sobering. And then I go back to my supervisor and I say very quickly, here are my isolates, this is what I'm finding in the laboratory, but I'm interested in how we can stop this. And my supervisor says to me, well then you're going to have to get out of my office. He literally said, get out of my office, because here is where we study the science and not the why people are in that situation. And then I thought, this is my commitment to the why, the how, and how to stop it.
It's hard to follow because I did not have a plan at all. When I finished graduate school, through an internship, I got a job working in the South Bronx of New York, which is a very, very tough neighborhood. Still tougher than any place in Atlanta, I would tell me. But I was working for a gentleman named Edward Lowe, who built Roosevelt Island, a lot of other places. He told me about the Foreign Service. In those days, you had to build a library. And I went and I read a book and I said, these people seem too snooty. United States Agency for International Development, which helps the poor, and the CIA looks cool, because I was a fan of all the James Bond movies and all this. I didn't have a car, I didn't have fancy clothes, and I thought CIA would be a way. CIA and AID both rejected me, so I had to take the Foreign Service exam. I'd never been overseas, I didn't speak a foreign language. And so that is why I'm so high on people joining the diplomatic corps, because you do not have to have track. You do not have to have lived other places. Your own life experience can add a lot. And so the Foreign Service has taught me several languages and shown me the world, and have given me opportunities to work and meet people that I would never imagine.
So we have 4 areas on the stage today. We have diplomacy, we have humanitarian, we have military service, and we have elected office. And that was by design. And so just to point out for all of you, there's just so many ways that you can plug in. I think it's important to know that not everybody just has this moment where it dawns on them and everything is crystal clear. I don't think anybody would ever say that they had that. If they did, I might question the wisdom of being too clear about what you're going to do with the rest of your life. So I guess my question for each of you is, what advice do you have for those of us, we're not all clear still to this day, on how to find the clarity? I heard a lot about mission and sense of calling. So I'll start with you, Ambassador Thomas. How did you find that clarity? What advice would you have for anyone here who's looking for that clarity?
Thank you for that. I think it depends on the individual and what you want to do. I know there's a new term called soft life, and I don't understand from my generation, soft life.
Soft life?
Yes.
As opposed to like having a hard life?
Yes. They know soft life.
Is that the goal, to have a soft life?
Yeah, it's a soft life. For a lot of them it is. We didn't have that option. But not critical. But my point is, you have to decide what you want. And so I very much decided, when you join the Foreign Services, who knows, they take you away. We went to Harper's Ferry. At that time, there was a brand new game, Trivial Pursuit. And people won without giving up a dime. I was like, oh my God. And that's when I said, I better just work harder. And I decided to work harder than everybody else. But I also knew that you had to try to spend time with your family, which is very difficult, but you have to do it, and you end up sacrificing some parts of things, no matter what you do. So for me, it was just the old adage of hard, working harder than everybody else, but also finding things that I did not know growing up in New York. Learning how to swim, becoming a swim judge, learning how to golf, trek. Don't let anybody define what you like and how you want to do it. And question authority. I went to Jesuit school, so they always told us, question authority. Always question authority. And lastly, have the courage and self-awareness to understand when you've made a mistake, when you've done something wrong, and how you're going to correct it, because we all do. At the end of the day, most times it's not a big deal. And if it is, you get fired and lose your job, you'll find something else. But work hard. Work hard.
I'd say building on that, it's really finding those moments that you know you are listening to your own soul. Perhaps when you woke up this morning, you had a sense of what I used to call I'm meeting with myself or meeting my future self. That you are making those investments in those moments to get up, to take the train, to get up in the dark, to read that extra book. I don't know that there is one shining moment of clarity. I do know that there is a rededication each time you try a little bit more. That's the first. Secondly, I'd say, I didn't have any mentors, and I can't say today I really have mentors, because I know the challenges in my own pathway, either as a parent or as someone who had to put myself through school in different ways, and I don't really ascribe to the fact that someone else might be able to know those roadblocks. But what I do believe is that there are elders. I very much believe that there are people who've come before us, and they can be 3 years older than you, they can be 30 years older than you, and time is valuable. And to sit down in the presence of people who have no ulterior motive can help you define more moments of clarity. So yourself, listen to your voice, keep meeting your future self, and find those who've gone before you.
I think a lot about the phrase, you don't know what you don't know. And I think for me, my life has been driven by these moments where I've tried to expose myself to new experiences and new opportunities so that I have a chance to discover something about myself that I didn't know. When I was in high school, I studied Spanish for all 4 years, and I'm not fluent. I know my fellow panelists with oral languages to speak, but I wanted to be like that once upon a time in my life. I took Mandarin Chinese for 2 years in college, and then when I was in the Army, I informally studied Arabic when I was in Iraq. But those sorts of experiences were things where I just wanted to try something different, try something new, and see if I liked it. Picked up music, and a lot of my friends who play music have been playing since they were in elementary school. I was in my 20s when I learned to play guitar. Taking my wife to swing dancing classes, those sorts of things. You never know what you will love or like, or even just don't like if you don't expose yourself to new opportunities. And that's something I continue to try to take with me every day when I'm exposed to an opportunity.
In my case, I would say surround yourself with people who inspire you. So my first professional job was in information technology was with my best friend from high school. He dropped out of college when I went to college. After one semester, he thought, I know more than these professors, now I'm going to go out there and I'm going to do this work on my own. It took a lot of humility on my part to say I have this bachelor's degree, I went to a world-class institution, and I'm going to work for someone who's a college dropout. But he was really eager, a person who inspired people around him. And I said, I want to work with him. And so that opened other doors, and we both walked through the doors of IBM and had excellent careers there. And at a certain point I said, this is really fantastic, and then I decided I want to do something different. And going back to that friend of mine who told me about the Foreign Service, he was also the one who inspired me to change my college major. So you will find people throughout your life who you say, this person is doing the right thing. Maybe they're your elders, maybe they're your peers, but if you surround yourself with people who give you a sense of purpose, mission of I'm doing the right thing, I'm with my people, then you're going to be in a good spot.
Picking up on the theme of service, all of you have spent your careers making the world a better place in different ways. I love what you said, Jason, about coming back to Atlanta from the Middle East to make sure Atlanta stands the test of time, like ancient cities around Afghanistan. Where does it come from? So did you wake up one day in your dorm room at MIT like, I want to change the world? Like, where did that start?
It really started with my father. So he was in the military. He was in the U.S. Army for 20 years, so I got to see him put on a uniform, and he had served in Vietnam, he served in Korea. And when I was a teenager, he got deployed to Germany, and my mom and my brother and I all got to live in Germany together. And we got to see foreign policy up front. As a teenager, we realized, okay, there's tens of thousands of U.S. soldiers who were protecting Western Europe from the Soviet expansion. And never thought at that time that the wall would come down when I was in college. I never thought that we would be sitting here today and worrying about Russia trying to expand again into Europe and invading the next largest country in Europe. So for me, that was that moment, sort of seeing my dad every day, putting on the uniform, serving this country, that eventually when that opportunity came, I said, you know what, it's time to follow my college business.
I think for me, I've always known I wanted to do something good for myself. I just didn't know how that would manifest itself. Like I said, I went to school to be a teacher. My biggest influence in my life outside of my mother was my high school history teacher, who played a pivotal role in me even going to or looking at school in Ohio, let alone deciding to not do it. Sound Georgia State, never out Georgia State alone, but at the time when I graduated from high school, Georgia State was a safe school and didn't get the EGA, but my high school history teacher was a big influence, and so I always knew I wanted to do something bigger than myself. Even when I decided not to go the teaching route, I had considered applying for opportunities in many different nonprofit sectors, trying to do something that would give back in a meaningful way. When I eventually went to grad school, I jokingly call it bureaucrat school, but when I got my master's in public administration, I never thought I was going to one day run for office, or certainly Atlanta City Council. I thought I was going to be working in some dark basement somewhere at City Hall, stamping documents, just making the city run the way it's supposed to, just from an operational standpoint. But I think that service is something that has always been, and it may be something my mother had instilled in me, just through the fact that I come from a family of teachers. I come from a family that has always given back in a meaningful way. I may not have had the direction of I want to do this very specific thing, but I've always known that something bigger than just going to work every day and clocking in, clocking out, and turning on the TV when I get home wasn't enough for me.
I'd say similar. I definitely have had parents and elders and family members that have used a great portion of their life in service of others, and not always publicly. I grew up with a mother from the time she was about 45, 50, would send food to the poor. That's how we celebrated her birthday every year. We would deliver food, a lot of it, to people who would accept it, those who wouldn't. And that for her was just a blessing. My father believed very much in food. He grew up extremely poor. He wouldn't allow anyone to interrupt us when we were eating. My mother would come along. She'd always have something she wanted us to do. She'd be like, go tidy this up. My father would say to her, Laura, stop. To have food is in front of them. Let them eat. Let the children eat. So I think, there's service in the community, there's service in your home, and rejection. I mean, if you've woken up this morning and come here, it's not just to hear about what has worked. I've walked into places with my resume and offered to volunteer when I was starting out, and it's been a case of no. You didn't look like our typical volunteer then. What did the typical volunteer look like? Spoke 4 languages, had perhaps learned French while skiing in Val d'Isère, had a certain background, had jumped off the mountains in Mongolia and plunged the depths in Timbuktu, and all you're asking to do is come in and give your time and be what you can be in any way possible. And that was a no. So I think for me, if I really will say service, it's on 3 levels. Parents and people who've done it, and people who serve in their own homes. That spirit of service is the one that says, I serve my children, I serve my neighbors, I serve my community members. And truly in frankness, I would say I have a neighbor who pretty much hates everyone on our street. Very ill, very cantankerous. But service is about getting up, going there and picking up stuff from his front porch so that it doesn't get stolen while he can't come outside. And even though we all sense deep loathing from this neighbor, that's service as well, when it's uncomfortable, when you know it's not right.
I feel a little overwhelmed. I guess I was the youngest child, so I didn't know. You see your parents do things. My daddy went to Morris Brown, my mother went to Allen. Daddy served in wars and loved me. NYU in social work, she marched with Dr. King. We always went to church, went to family events. But you're not taking this in really as admiration. They don't know what they're doing, and you don't care. But as you get older, you have a sense of what they're doing, and you learn that the things they did, whether it's take care of neighbors or friends or relatives, is ingrained in you from your parents, your family, and clearly our neighbors in our neighborhood in New York, with great migration. Everybody had come from the South and from the Caribbean in those days. So that, and then when you join the government, there are so many other ways to serve people that you just don't think about. The proudest achievement I ever had in my life was in the Philippines when our USAID director was up until recently deputy chair, Gloria Steele, came to me and said, there are 4,000 women die each year from postpartum bleeding. They could not afford the dollar for a drip that prevents the postmortem bleeding that you have in the United States. And we worked with the U.S. government, Philippine government, and an American pharmaceutical company to come up with a drip that anybody could give a shot to in a woman's hip after she gives birth. And you know you're saving more than 4,000 lives, because most of them already had children. There are other ways to serve that are not going to get in the newspapers and not thinking about that. But that is one of the things that our government did, among many that I'm most proud of.
All of you have served internationally, you know, for various stints, and it could be a year, it could be 30 years. This is a professional development conversation and conference seminar this morning. What transferable professional skills did you all learn by working internationally? You start with the Ambassador Thomas. I'm sure the list is very long.
I'll be brief. Listening, which Ms. Nunn mentioned. Americans don't like to listen. You have two Americans, one foreigner. We're always providing a solution without knowing the person's environment. And how would you think about that? Also, learn languages, because I'm from New York, you guys are from Georgia. Our English language is different, right? So you don't understand, and that allows you to learn the culture. Okay? My wife is from the Philippines. September 1st, each year, begins Christmas season in the Philippines. So I'm hearing Christmas songs September 1st. Okay, people go, oh, this is crazy. But to other people, we have crazy things. We write in cursive with uppercase and lowercase. The rest of the world, what the hell is this? Simple things that you take for granted are part of other people's culture. Don't dismiss them. Learn them and learn why and understand. When I landed in Nigeria, my second coast, I saw a sign that said, "Black is beautiful. Drink Guinness Stout." So what relates in one culture clearly is not going to relate in another culture. So listen, learn languages, and open your hearts and minds to other folks' culture.
Wow. I'm not sure I should say anything else, because I entirely agree. I'd say maybe add value. It's an easy thing to say add value. Everything we do, everyone is valuable. But look for ways to add value. Those of you who are looking at international work, maybe it's a phrase that's much easier to understand in the private sector. You take a commodity like rice, and it's something else, or corn, by the time it's on the supermarket shelves. They will say that's a value chain. At every point, it's adding value till it's something else on the supermarket shelf. Look for ways in which you add value, but I would say that life and a career, that what I've learned in international is to strike the balance, to add something, but take out the ego. And that's what makes it work. Take the ego out, leave it at home. Other transferable skills, I would say, mediation and arbitration. If you ever have a chance to go, there are lots of colleges. I love GSU, I go back to school continuously. I'll sign up, I'll leave work, I'll go to the GSU campus, preferably in Perimeter, and I'll do a little course for $20. But I would really say, keep on learning, and it doesn't have to cost thousands of dollars. The third thing I've learned is open spaces for others. I'm not just talking about pay it forward, like reach forward or someone. When you are physically somewhere, I came back from the United Nations General Assembly week this week. I take a step back and I ask myself, who's standing alone in the corners? That person was me 20 years ago. And ask them, do you want to join in? If the person says, no, have you never heard of COVID? Rather not, that's fine with me. But if they say, yes, please, I was eating alone and I didn't know how to insert myself. That's what I've learned in international development. The world is what we make of it. Take a step back, call someone into the circle. They are asking themselves, how can I join this group of people who are chatting about something? That's what I've learned. I think transfers across business, government, philanthropy, and social services.
That was great too. Just to lean in on the active listening piece, understanding where there's some commonality with the person that you're talking to goes a long way in helping building rapport and building a relationship. When I was in both Iraq and Afghanistan, I'm from half a world away, but being able to learn about people's personal experiences, life experiences, families, and I got to meet, and when I was just on regular patrol, a guy that was a Taekwondo instructor, and I was able to build rapport with him because I took Taekwondo classes back when I was younger for 5 years, and we were able to build a bond about that particular issue. And those sorts of experiences just go so much a long way to not only help you understand that the folks that we might speak a different language, you might have different cultural experiences, but we're a lot more alike than we are different. And it goes the other way around. I mean, I was in uniform occupying a foreign country, and so there were folks who had very direct and angry feelings about that. But the more that they saw me as a person, the more they saw me as more like them than not helped in that relationship building in ways that those are lessons that I've taken with me for the rest of my life, even in electoral politics. One thing I will add too is just something that just from my time in the military in general is set an example, lead in the way that you expect others to follow. Making sure that you are creating a set of expectations and a set of behaviors that you want people to model. Continue to just be deliberate about that, because you get so much out of the people that you work with and serve with if you're doing the things that you're expecting them to do. So continue to try to model the behaviors that you expect others to follow.
And to build on that, I think a big revelation for me is that we are all connected. I happen to come from a Mexican-American family, but what I found is as I traveled the world, as I got to meet other people, you find the differences and then you find the commonalities. And you also find that if we are connected to each other, we can accomplish things together. So as I'm sitting here with this amazing group of panelists, I think about the problems that we might work on together. And I might sit at another table and think about the skills that you could bring to a situation that might arise in the future. I was also thinking about the fact that you hear our resumes. It's going to sound like we have this figured out. That's not necessarily the case. You're going to be a beginner, you're going to be a novice. And I think especially when you're traveling to a new country and you're learning a foreign language, it takes a lot of humility as well to say, I'm going to be illiterate in this language. In a language that someone who's 4 or 5 years old can already speak fluent. And the more you give yourself into that humility, you say, okay, that's all right. I can't communicate, but maybe tomorrow I can say hello. Maybe a week from now I can order food from the restaurant and get the meal that I want. Maybe a week after that I can argue with the taxi driver about how much he's charging me to take me to a location. But through that process, you are learning more about the people that you're with. You're learning more about their circumstances. You're learning about ways that you can help them, ways that they can help you. And as you do that more and more often, you're going to develop those cultural skills, those life skills that when you're confronted with a challenge, and it might be a work project, it might be a crisis where you say, I work for the American Embassy and I'm stuck on this hilltop and there's water rushing everywhere and I don't know when we're going to get home or if we're going to get home. You realize, okay, but I've got a group of people here with me and we're going to figure out a way to get ourselves home safe.
Is there a story there, Samuel?
There sure is. There sure is. But maybe for another day.
Okay, glad you made it up there. So this is a question that I think is really important. You can't make it halfway through or all the way through your career without, I don't want to say regrets, but you would have done things differently. So I'm going to ask each of you to talk about some things that, what would you do differently if you were to start all over again?
Well, I'm very excited about the opportunity to speak to you today because I went through university and never took advantage of the opportunities that I think a lot of young people can take advantage of. So with the Department of State, we offer study abroad scholarships for maybe students who are Pell Grant recipients like me, maybe couldn't afford to do an internship or study abroad if they didn't have someone assisting. We've got scholarships where if you wanted to learn a foreign language and didn't get the opportunity to, we can give you an immersive experience. We have graduate fellowships that will lead to a guaranteed career in foreign service. So if there are opportunities that you want to explore, we have some. My colleagues up here will let you know about many others that exist out there. You're living in a very international city, and a community of folks who are very, very well connected. So I would say, take advantage of that. If you've got that hunger or that desire, you're really, really well positioned to take advantage of that and get out there and see the world and make a contribution to improving it.
I would say, just to piggyback off of that, those skills, those language skills especially that you did, continue to put in the work, continue to practice them. That's my biggest regret is I took 4 years of formal education in Spanish in high school, 2 years of formal education in Mandarin Chinese in college, and like I said, when I was in Arabic, I tried to do my best to learn. I taught myself to read and write Arabic, but conversation Arabic has gone out the window. And for all three of those languages, I struggle to this day because I haven't had the opportunity to practice or to continue my education or to take advantage of those immersive opportunities that exist out there. And I wish that I had been more deliberate about that. I never did study abroad. I actually, my fun fact that I used to tell people is I didn't even have a passport until I was 31. So I visited 6 countries across the globe and got a passport. They call it employment orders, and still get around. But I was a little late to the game in terms of leaning on those educational opportunities, and I wish I had taken advantage of them.
I think there'll be a couple of things, but I'm going to keep on the languages trail very quickly. Try and learn languages while you are in your first country. But this is advice for those planning to live and work overseas. I found it very challenging to have my first child and go to night school to learn French in Dutch. So the teacher would only speak her native language and then teach French to Dutch speakers. And I remember thinking, this is hard. I wish I'd done it when I was in an Anglophone country. So if you have opportunities while you're home, if this is home in the US, wherever home is for you, try and do it sooner rather than later. The second thing I'll say, I think I regret, is not learning how to take notes very quickly. I'm going to just focus in very quickly, because I don't want to just give generic guidance. I want to speak to anyone who's thinking particularly of moving into international development now. Learn how to take good notes. And this may sound very simple, there is a lot of talking in this space. I am guilty of it right now, but there is a great deal of talking. Learn to do the things you can, even if it means LinkedIn Learning, a $20 course somewhere. Your notes are your notes for the record, and they can change the course of a dialogue, a negotiated agreement, or a global agreement. And the third and the last thing I'll say is time management. I regret not being better with my time. I don't regret where I have been or what I have done, and I think time management allows us to be sure we're leaning in where we can, where we should.
I regret not learning how to draft until I was in the Foreign Service. So in the Foreign Service, we call writing drafting. And as Saul knows, we would edit Mark Twain. I'm not a political officer, you're a public affairs officer. And drafting, writing, and accepting the criticism, because they're going to change everything. To this day, I am with my students, you should see, correcting. But when I'm working at the White House, I was there on 9/11 afterwards, and Secretary Rice, she was secretary, sent me into the Oval Office to brief President Bush on phone calls with the Pakistan and Indian leaders. And President Bush didn't understand what one was saying. I could go behind President Bush's desk and write as he was talking. I could not have done that when I first joined the Foreign Service. So I learned that. And last, always be kind to everyone. You can do that. In June 2012, we did something you've only seen in movies. We cleared out the Mandarin Hotel in DC's cafeteria because we're having a meeting with the Filipino president, trying to find a way to prevent what's still going on China, South China Sea interaction. And that's when I learned by accident that my team, the New York Giants, was coming to the White House the next day because we had won the Super Bowl, you know, which we're not going to do this year. But I went upstairs and there were two Filipino billionaires, Dado Benatal and Lloyd O. Lewis. Lloyd O. Lewis' husband, Reginald Lewis, is the first African American. And they wanted to meet the head of Ebony Magazine, famous. But ages, you know, culture means somebody else has to introduce. I walked over there and I got this. I don't have time to talk to them, right? So we had to short back. I lost face. The next day we're doing the pre-brief with President Obama and he says, Harry, why are you smiling so much? I go, the Giants are coming. I don't care what the President of the Philippines and President Obama are going to say, because I really know what they're going to say anyway, you know? And President Obama says, Harry, when this is over, you want to go meet the Giants? Oh my God, yes. And afterwards, he took me by my hand. I had to go run out of the Oval Office because you can't bring, electronic equipment in there, and get my phone and iPad. And he took me by my hand and led me out to where the Giants were and introduced me, put me in the front row above the Chief of Staff and Congress. President Obama will never remember that, but I will always remember that the most powerful person in the world took time to be kind to me. So you can be kind to anyone, the person in your room, not just the most powerful person.
I'd love to open this up to questions. Would anybody like to kick us off with a question? And we will have time to talk to them individually. We'll set them up at tables. Here in the back, would you introduce yourself and let us know where you're from?
She can just go there and talk.
Good morning. My name is Natasha Bailey, and I am part of the Young Leaders World Affairs Council. I also am a UX researcher working as a contractor, ironically on a project with the Department of State and Consular Affairs right now. And I'm originally from Kansas, but I've been in Atlanta for about 7 years now. First, thank you all so much for your time and sharing your experiences with us. And I had, I think, one question for the group in general, and then a particular question. The first is one of the things that you all have mentioned is the importance of learning languages, and I'm struggling with teaching myself French right now. So I'm very interested in strategies that you've implemented, particularly learning while not in an immersive environment. The other question that I had, particularly for you, Dr. Cece, because I know you mentioned that you haven't had mentors, but do you accept mentees?
I think Polly was about to speak, please.
Just on the first question, the languages, just some advice that I got from my interpreter when I was in Iraq that I've taken to heart and continue to use to this day is we all start learning languages when we're young. We have our parents read to us, we have teachers read to us. Children's books are geared towards that kind of early learning phase in our development, and I've taken that approach when learning another language. So reading children's books from other languages has been really helpful for me in terms of that basic how communication is structured, and there's more flourish that comes as you develop, but children's books have been helpful for me to learn in a way that is intuitive for younger people in our language as well. Just want to add that.
I think that's a brilliant suggestion. I think one that's very helpful to us all. Then with an eye on the clock, maybe I'll focus in on your second question about mentees. Is that helpful? First of all, let me say thank you for coming. people often thank the panelists, but I think together we make the room work and we learn from each other. I do mentor when it's a two-way agreement that I will learn something from the mentee in return. So I was very happy to even be able to learn more about Atlanta or the Silver Comet Trail. But it is not a disregard for mentors. It is simply an acknowledgement that many of us, for me, we have pathways that perhaps someone else wouldn't understand. But most certainly, my organization also has an internship program, which I started when I joined. I think it's very important for us to be pulling from different institutions in DC, as well as in Atlanta. That's one of my commitments, that people shouldn't have to leave their hometown and their chosen family or community to be able to move into international affairs. So if it's a mentorship or an internship, happy to speak a little bit more in the break.
Let me go speak.
Hi, good morning. First of all, thanks for taking the time to speak to us. Really appreciate it. My name is Jay Bingley. I am new transplant to Atlanta. I've been here for about a year. From Denver, Colorado, originally from Jamaica. So the island in me. And my question is kind of around, it's around global affairs, but it's also around like, now that Atlanta is in a position where it's going to be hosting the World Cup, which basically puts us on the world stage. As a young leader here, my question is, how can us as young professionals with an international, globally minded viewpoint really kind of play a role into presenting Atlanta and connecting Atlanta with globally minded professional people from around the world as they come to be a part of the city, with the World Cup?
Yeah, as the City of Atlanta representative. So one of the things I'm really proud and excited about with the city is that we have a very robust Office of Immigrant and International Affairs, and we have a number of different events that we have throughout the year where we connect with our consulates and other international communities here in the heart of the city. I will take advantage of those opportunities as they come up. We see events that are coming up to just connect with that broader Atlanta community that is based here in Atlanta. I know with the World Cup coming, we're working on a lot of different programming and partnerships, everything from how do we promote soccer as a sport, working with soccer industries, working with Atlanta United to make sure that happens, to working with our Atlanta Commission of Visitors Bureau to ensure that the folks that do visit Atlanta who aren't familiar with our city and aren't familiar with the state of Georgia want to continue to invest and visit here in the future. And so there's some bigger things that the city's working on, but I think at the very least, as far as getting your foot in the door, connecting with the folks doing that work, our Office of Immigrant and International Affairs is the way to go. In fact, I think when Rick and I last saw each other was at an event that was hosted by them with a partnership with the Truman Center around state and local diplomacy and how the city of Atlanta fits into that. We're a very international, we're only 500,000 people, but we're definitely punching above our weight in terms of our connection to the global community, with our airport, with the culture that we're exporting to different parts of the world. So there's a lot of opportunities that will be coming, and just be on the lookout for that. But connect with the Office of, and I keep thinking about the full name because we just changed the name, so that's why it takes me a while to say it. But the Office of Immigrant and International Affairs is, I think, your ticket to find out about your community.
And if I'll plug for Anna Petrova, who works for that department. She's on our Young Leaders Executive Board, and she is spearheading a program on October 5th that we're hosting about the World Cup coming to Atlanta. So I interrupted you, Jay. Did you have a follow-up?
I was going to say, I was going to hold you to that and ask for introduction. So
Here, she's right here. Any other questions? Anna?
Hi, Jason. Good to meet you. My name is Anna Petrova. I'm part of the Mayor's Office of International and Immigrant Affairs. I kind of have a question about Atlanta broadly, because every time I travel, I tell people, I work for the city, I do international affairs. I think of wait, Atlanta's international? Like they're so confused that there's international initiatives at the local level. And we know, as citizens of Atlanta, that we're incredibly international, and businesses, consular corps, everyone is here. But why is the perception of Atlanta so different from people who don't live here? Why do you think that it still hasn't gotten around that it's such a complete international city?
Is that a question for the panel? I'd actually be curious. Jason is the city, but also with the others, what do you all think?
I will say maybe media and investments. I sit on many conference calls where people assume I'm either in the UK or I'm in South Africa, and you say Atlanta, and they're like, Atlanta, Georgia? Or Georgia, the Caucasus in Europe.
Yeah.
So I think it's A, it's investment, B, I think it's investing in media. And this is something that I'm personally been interested in also for the Global South. That we empower and provide investments from philanthropy, foundations, from government, to make sure that we have a robust civil society that is very clear about where they are and what they do. That's the first thing. And then I know you're going to get other answers from the panel, but I think that one of the things that we're changing also is through remote work, being very explicit. I ask my team to be very explicit when we start conference calls about where we are based. Half of my team is in DC. I recruit deliberately and intentionally from Atlanta, Georgia. And we say deliberately, this is not because of cost of living, because there are stereotypes involved, but because we have a thriving global framework, a tapestry of organizations here that we're proud to represent. So I think also just being very visible about who's here. And I think that that's going to take a little bit of training and joining hands together across organizations. Those are my thoughts. I'm curious what the other panelists think.
I think the answer is going to depend on where you go. So when I served in Tbilisi, in the Caucasus, people knew everything about Atlanta because there had been a sister cities collaboration with the city of Tbilisi. And there were so many Georgians from the state of Georgia going to the Republic of Georgia from the tiny town of Tifton, Georgia, where my parents lived. There were already connections between that small community and the Republic of Georgia. So I think there is some work to do to get the word out. And Atlanta's been on the world stage before. In 1996, I was here from about 1994. So for those of you who've only been in Atlanta for a couple of years, that vast downtown connector, 6 lanes in each direction, didn't used to be that way. So there was a lot of investment, a lot of effort by the city of Atlanta to create the infrastructure for the Olympic venues. So I'm very excited that Atlanta will be on the world stage again in 2026. And use that as an opportunity. And I will say that for young people today, you are really in a position to let other young people know about the great things that Atlanta is doing. I was doing social media or leading a team that was doing social media, and it was sort of new technology to me. And I remember an Apple executive coming and saying, if you show technology to someone who's young enough, it's not technology, it's just a part of their lives. So most of you have grown up in sort of this digital space, and you can really leverage those tools to help those of us who are older and your peers really become aware of all the wonderful things that Atlanta is doing.
I would like to know if I can add something, because I'm sure that the intention of the World Affairs Council of Atlanta is always to stimulate, to catalyze, to create connections. It would be fantastic to have something like a UN General Assembly Week. I'm not going to explain what UNGA is. I'm just going to explain what I saw while being in the city for 2 weeks. Every Uber driver, every restaurant owner, the guy who sells flags outside of Penn Station feels a part of this event. And they groan and they complain and they talk about the traffic, but there's a sense of pride. They'll tell me after US Open starts the UN General Assembly, but it's terrible. How can we help you? Because you've asked us a question, but I think maybe the answer is, why am I not in a room with you, having a conversation about what are the most important weeks here in Atlanta and how we can help contribute to that?
Well, I would love for the World Affairs Council of Atlanta to have like a shadow UNGA in Atlanta, although I was up there this week too, so we all actually have to go to New York that week. We don't have to, but so maybe the next week. It's very overwhelming to be part of the United Nations General Assembly, just the energy and activity. But I'm gonna go ahead and answer, I'm not a panelist, I'm a moderator, because I have to think about this a lot as the president of the World Affairs Council of Atlanta. Atlanta's always been an international city, cradle of the civil rights movement, home of the Carter Center, home of CARE. That International is based out of Brunswick. Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, HBCUs, Atlanta University Center, Georgia Tech, Georgia State. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And if everybody in the world doesn't know that, that's okay, we do, right? I'm not as worried about somebody in the Philippines thinking Atlanta is the most international city on the planet, as long as the people living and working and doing business in Atlanta do feel that sense of pride. And that, companies still come to Atlanta to do business, and they're creating jobs. So I think that people who are looking for, particularly for direct investment, they're coming to Georgia, they're coming to Atlanta, and I think that that's good for all of us because it makes our city more diverse and more interesting, and we'll just continue to tell the story. But if just because Atlanta isn't New York or Chicago or San Francisco doesn't mean that we don't have it all going on here. So that's kind of what I focus on is the World Affairs Council of Atlanta, is what impact can I make in my particular sphere of influence. And for those who want to know, who want to listen deeply to what we have to offer, we have a message to share. Any final questions before we break and I allow you all to talk to the panelists individually? We have a question in the far back. Go back here. And then we can, was there another second question here? You have a question here, okay.
Hi, so I guess this question is for the two diplomats. Just a question around.
Would you introduce yourself?
Sorry, I apologize. Julian Clayton, I had the benefit of working and living overseas. I was a former Robert Bosch Fellow, so I learned German and I came back from Germany. I paid a tutor to continue teaching me German so I didn't lose it. I know the experience of like having Spanish fly on my head and Japanese, and this is gone. But I'm curious as to how the two diplomats kind of formulated your timeline around your career. I heard you started in 2002, then you went into the Foreign Service in 2004. But just kind of walk us through quickly your timeline and how you developed becoming outside of the Foreign Service into the Foreign Service and then building your career up to being a diplomat. And I guess that's buffeted against the idea that lots of diplomats and those who rise to the ranks of ambassador are increasingly political appointees and not coming up through the Foreign Service. So how did you view that process within your own time frame of building your career?
So I would say that my career progression, again, I learned about the fact that the Foreign Service Officer test even existed, and I went through a fairly quick learning curve because I happen to know a diplomat. And I just assumed that I was going to be going to Bogota, Colombia for my first assignment. I was single at the time, I spoke Spanish. There was an active narco-terrorist insurgency happening in Colombia, and that would be the logical place for the Department of State to send a single native Spanish speaker, right? Send them, to the one of the most dangerous countries in the region. And I was right from my viewpoint at the time, but I didn't actually realize until I got to the country that it was actually much safer than I had expected. I had a wonderful time there. And a lot of the other decisions initially in my career, you don't have necessarily as much say in your career progression at the beginning. And I think that's going to be the case for many of us, right? We need novice Foreign Service officers, we need novice development workers and specialists, or we need new lieutenants. But over time, you start realizing there are parts of the world that really interest me. There are people that I want to work for. And that was very important. So after a while, it became very important for me to find a leader or an office or an embassy where people said, this is a good place to work, and there are kind people here. This is going to be a good place for me to work. And that's basically, I didn't necessarily have a deliberate plan, and I thought I would spend most of my career in Latin America, and that wasn't the case. So I was actually also open to learning new languages, learned two completely different languages. I did not know at the time that Georgian had its own alphabet and its own language, so that was an interesting adventure. But it was worthwhile, and now here I am 19 years later, still sort of looking for the next adventure, and I'll turn it over to Pastor Thomas to talk about his experience.
Thank you. We have orientation class, that's when you get your assignments. Went off to Peru as a vice consul, you do consul work, visa work. We have a very competitive process. You get an evaluation each year. Your ability to get tenure and promotions are based on that. And our ranks equate to military ranks. So I did that in Peru, consular work, in northern Nigeria, political work. Then I came back to Washington as a staff assistant, coffee maker, popcorn maker work. And it's very important to do that kind of work, the assistant secretary for African Affairs, because you're learning a lot. Then I went to Zimbabwe 3 years. I got to meet Nelson Mandela 3 times. And I was proud to be able to say I was from the United States when he asked where from there I came back to Washington, working in the Undersecretary of Political Affairs, was a third ranking person. And all the time you're trying to get promoted on these evaluations where they evaluate your ability to write, to manage, to speak, to get along with people, all of those things, manage. And then went to work in an office called the Operations Center. The Ops Center is our 24-hour learning, briefing, and crisis management place. And I would say a huge number of the leaders of the Foreign Service come out of there, huge number. And it's 24/7, you're working shift work, you're always sleepy. Every 2 days your shifts will change. From there I did Hindi language training and went to India, lived in Kashmir. Wish I could have time to tell you about kidnapping and how that related to them, but I don't. And then back to the Ops Center as a deputy director, then to the White House to work for Dr. Rice, National Security Council. I got promoted to the Senior Foreign Service when I was there. Secretary Powell was able to tell me that when I was in New Delhi. And from there to Bangladesh ambassador. And there's competitive processes for all of these things. And retired out of Zimbabwe after going to the Philippines. So you're still trying to go up. Once you reach colonel, the equivalent of colonel, you have an opportunity to try to become a general. If you become a general, that's when you can compete theoretically to be an ambassador. If you don't become a colonel or something, you retire as a colonel to go over, and that's when most people will retire.
And let's have one final question here, and then we'll take a break.
Good morning. Thank you so much for an incredible seminar. This is my first time attending any event from the World Affairs Council, and it's incredible. My name is Esty Dodo Dem-Edem, that is uncomfortable, I know. But I practice litigation. I'm an attorney here in Atlanta. And I've always been interested in going international, not just within the realms of law, but breaking into other practice areas and doing other things. And so just generally asking for advice on what you think my next step should be, what skills I should acquire at this point, help transition perhaps a different career or practice area. Oftentimes when I go to international leaders, they often bring a lot of opportunities that are in law. And so I'm kind of competing with my more senior attorneys. And so that kind of puts me at a disadvantage. And so just looking for insight. Thank you.
I would just say, as someone who made a huge career change 2 years ago, there's always a place for you. No matter what your level of experience, no matter where your background, there is a place for you. And not to say, well, all these other people have all this experience, I'll never make it. There is a place for you, you'll find it. And I needed to, I had a 20-year career in broadcast journalism. it wouldn't have made sense for me to transition as president of the World Affairs Council, this was the place for me. It's the perfect place for me at the right time. So that's just a piece of personal career experience, that for you to just have that confidence, there is a place for you and you'll find it. Now to our actual experts.
I think so. In the Foreign Service, 10% are attorneys. They write well, they know how to conceptualize. We also have a legal affairs department, but so many corporations have attorneys. If you look at all of these call centers, out processing places, they're in Poland, they're in the Philippines, they're in India, but they operate under U.S. law. So there's so many opportunities that you can look for to work in the United States or overseas as an attorney, or totally switch gears. So that's something that you might want to consider.
I would say, building on that, it's know what skills you bring, and it shouldn't all be on you. Good hiring managers know what they're looking for. And for me, when I interview, I'm looking for risk management. Every organization that wants to stay in business as a thriving enterprise, private sector, or the United Nations like me, I'm looking for people who can help reduce risk and increase compliance. And so that might not need you to be a lawyer, but to have trained in the ability to identify risk, reduce it. I think those are some of the things that perhaps you should also be highlighting when you interview. And again, the burden is not just on you. I'm happy to speak a little bit more, and I really hope to be able to work with the World Affairs Council Atlanta further. I think that there are things like public speaking, effective communication, and pathways to purpose that I'm developing for my team. I'd be happy to share with you all more. A series of people working in international affairs, behind the scenes, treasury, compliance, risk management, financial, training, HR, that I'd love to be able to bring more to the stage. Thank you.
Well, with that, we're going to give an applause to our wonderful speakers. Thank you so much. And we have some World Affairs Council of Atlanta gifts for each of you. These are absolutely gorgeous ties. I see that Ambassador Thomas is a tie man. He's got, I think it's a golf tie. This is it's actually our logo on this tie, and then a scarf for Ken. So I hope that you'll wear them with pride. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
About 10:55. Please feel free to come and chat with these folks individually, stretch your legs, get some more coffee, and we'll be right back here at 10:55 for Dad's Garage.